The spotlight held steady on Dean's face. But his hand wasn't reaching for the microphone yet. 5,000 people watched him glance toward the wings, once, twice, then smile that famous smile. The orchestra waited, the audience waited, and 3 minutes earlier, a stagehand had whispered 6 words that weren't supposed to reach him until after the show. Now he stood center stage. Jacket unbuttoned, tie perfectly loose, looking like a man who had all the time in the world. The heat from the overhead lights pressed down on his shoulders. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the front row, ice clinked in glasses. A woman coughed. The theater breathed with the anticipation of 5,000 people who'd paid to forget their problems for 2 hours. But the note in his pocket said otherwise. And Dean Martin, Crooner, actor, man who made difficult look easy, was about to decide whether to do what he was told or what he believed was right. The dressing room door had been open. Dean was adjusting his cufflinks, silver, engraved with his initials, when Tommy appeared in the doorway. Tommy was one of the younger stagehands, maybe 22, with nervous energy that showed in every movement. He had dark hair that wouldn't stay combed, and the kind of earnest face that made you want to either help him or tell him the world was going to eat him alive. Right now, he was holding a folded piece of paper like it might catch fire. "Mr. Martin," Tommy's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "I was told to give you this after the show, but I thought you should." Dean took the paper without looking at it. The kid's hands were shaking. "You thought right, or you thought wrong?" "I don't know, sir." Tommy's Adam's apple bobbed. "They said after, but it seemed like maybe you'd want to know before." "Then let me read it first." Dean unfolded it once. The handwriting was neat, impersonal. His eyes moved across the words. "Read them once. Read them again." His jaw tightened for half a second, so brief you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. Then his face went smooth again. He refolded it, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and checked his watch. "How long until curtain?" "2 minutes, sir." "Then I've got 2 minutes." He smiled at Tommy. Easy, warm, the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd done the right thing, even when you weren't sure. "Thanks, kid. You did good." "Are you sure?" "Because if I messed up, you didn't mess up." Sometimes doing the right thing feels like a mistake. That's how you know it matters. Tommy nodded and backed out of the doorway, nearly tripped over a sandbag, caught himself, and disappeared. The note stayed in the pocket. Dean straightened his tie in the mirror, ran a hand through his hair, took a breath that was deeper than usual. Then he walked toward the stage like nothing had changed. But everything had. The house lights dropped. For a moment, the theater hung in darkness. Then the orchestra started, strings first, soft and sweet, building slowly, and a single spotlight carved a circle of gold on center stage. Dean walked into that circle like he was walking into his own living room. 5,000 people. Somewhere in the third row, a woman in pearls leaned forward. In the back, a man in a work shirt, probably came straight from the factory, probably saved for a month to afford the ticket, stood with his arms crossed, already smiling. The stage was warm under the lights. The air smelled like cigarette smoke and perfume, and anticipation. Dean lifted the microphone from its stand. The metallic click echoed through the sound system. His voice came out smooth, effortless. "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie." The crowd swayed. Someone in the balcony whistled. A woman near the aisle clapped twice, then caught herself and stopped, grinning. But here's the part you can't miss. His left hand stayed in his pocket, not resting, holding something. His fingers pressed against the folded paper, reminding himself it was real, that this wasn't just another show. The orchestra swelled. The brass came in strong, bright, filling the room with sound that made your chest vibrate. Front row to back wall, 5,000 bodies moving in the same rhythm. And in the wings, behind the velvet curtain, Tommy watched. His thumbnail was between his teeth. His mind was replaying the moment he'd handed over the note, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his young career. What the note said: Senator's wife in box 7. Wants 3 songs cut from tonight's set list. Doesn't want political references. Doesn't want anything controversial. Will pull funding from the venue renovation if you don't comply. This comes from upstairs. Not a request. Management. 9 lines. 61 words. A demand wrapped in polite corporate language. The kind of message that made your stomach tight and your jaw clench because it asked you to choose between your paycheck and your principles. Dean had read it twice in the dressing room. Once to understand it, once to decide what it meant. Now, halfway through the first verse, he could see box 7 from the corner of his eye. Red velvet curtains, thick and heavy, framing the private balcony, like a theater within a theater. 2 figures behind the brass railing, one of them blonde hair pulled back tight, dark dress that probably cost more than most people in the audience, made in a month, diamonds at her neck that caught the stage lights and threw tiny rainbows across the burgundy wallpaper, leaning forward like she owned the room. Maybe she did. Maybe her husband's position, her family's money, her network of connections, gave her the right to dictate what got sung and what stayed silent. Or maybe she just thought it did, which in practical terms amounted to the same thing. The man beside her, older gray suit, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck, sat back in his chair with his hands folded across his stomach. He wasn't watching Dean. He was watching his wife watching Dean, and his expression suggested he'd seen this particular drama play out before and knew how it would end. Dean hit the final note of the verse. The audience applauded, and somewhere in the back of his mind, in the part that had survived Vegas lounges and recording studio politics and the particular cruelty of an industry that loved you until you stopped being profitable, a small, quiet voice said, "This is where you decide who you are." The question was whether Dean cared enough to listen. The band hit the final chord. Applause rolled through the theater like thunder. Dean bowed slightly, raised the microphone, and spoke. "You're too kind. Really. I don't deserve it." Pause. Smile. "But I'll take it anyway." Laughter rippled through the crowd. In box 7, the woman didn't laugh. She watched. Dean turned to the piano player. Carl, 56, been with him for 9 years, knew every cue, every breath. "Carl, what do you say we slow it down?" Carl's fingers hovered over the keys. He glanced at the set list taped to the side of the piano. The next song wasn't slow. It was Ain't That a Kick in the Head, fast, brassy, full of energy. But Carl had been doing this long enough to know when to follow the plan and when to follow the man. He nodded. Started a soft intro, something Dean hadn't called for but somehow fit. Notice how the room shifted. The energy didn't drop, it deepened. People settled into their seats. The smokers in the back put out their cigarettes. Even the woman in box 7 leaned back slightly, arms crossed. Dean closed his eyes, took a breath, and when he started singing again, it wasn't the song anyone expected. It was Memories Are Made of This. Management had sent the note. That much was clear. But who in management? The venue director? The producer? Someone higher up the chain? And what did pool funding mean? Funding for this show, for the tour, for the recording contract that was supposed to be signed next month. Dean didn't know. And that was the problem. In the wings, Tommy was still there, half hidden behind a curtain, watching. He'd delivered the message, done his job. But now he was wondering if the job had been the right thing. Because Dean wasn't cutting songs. He was adding one. Carl kept playing, but his mind was racing. 56 years old, 9 years with Dean. Before that, 20 years in jazz clubs, dance halls, recording studios. He'd seen performers bomb, seen them freeze mid-song, seen careers end because someone made the wrong call at the wrong moment. The set list was set, rehearsed yesterday, timed during sound check this morning, 18 songs before intermission, each flowing into the next. Cut one, and the whole thing could fall apart. Add one, and something else had to go. But Dean hadn't said what to cut. He'd just started singing, so Carl followed, nodded to the drummer, signaled the horns, kept the tempo steady, and prayed. Dean had a plan. His left hand found the chord progression. His right hand sketched the melody, and his eyes stayed on Dean's posture, looking for any signal that would explain what was happening. Because something was happening. Carl knew the difference between improvisation and response, between following inspiration and navigating danger. And right now, Dean was navigating something. The question was whether management would accept a singer who went off script, whether the woman in box 7 would be satisfied or insulted. Carl hit the final chord, held it, let it fade, and wondered how many more surprises this night had in store. The song ended. More applause. A man in the front row stood up, clapping hard, grinning like he'd just won something. Dean pointed at him, winked, and the man sat down, still grinning. "You folks are making this too easy," Dean said into the microphone. His voice was relaxed, conversational, like he was telling a joke at a dinner party. "I might just stay up here all night." A woman shouted from somewhere in the balcony. "We wouldn't complain." Dean laughed. A genuine sound, not performance laughter. "Your husband might." The room erupted. Laughter rolled through the seats like a wave. Even box 7 cracked a smile. Not the woman in diamonds, but the man beside her, the older gentleman in the gray suit, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the brass railing, and for a moment his expression softened into something that might have been approval. "But here's what you need to see." Dean's hand went back to his pocket, just for a second, just long enough to feel the note still there. The paper soft now from the heat of the lights and the warmth of his palm. He hadn't thrown it away, hadn't forgotten about it, wasn't pretending it didn't even exist. He was carrying it with him, step by step, song by song, deciding in real time what to do, whether to comply or resist, whether to be the performer they'd hired or the artist he believed himself to be. And the clock kept ticking. 15 minutes until intermission, maybe 25 songs left to sing, depending on how fast he took them. Enough time to make a decision, enough time to regret it. In the wings, Rita had finished her conversation with Tommy. The kid looked shell-shocked, but he was still standing, still watching, still hoping, in the way young people hope, that everything would somehow work out without anyone getting hurt. Rita adjusted her headset and made a note on her clipboard. Then she glanced toward box 7, saw the woman in diamonds leaning forward again, and made another note, the kind of note that would end up in a report, the kind of report that ended careers. Dean started the next song, and the machinery of consequence began to turn. Halfway through Everybody Loves Somebody, Dean changed a lyric. Not much, just one word. The original line, "Everybody loves somebody sometime." What he sang, "Everybody needs somebody sometime." Loves, needs. A single syllable, a tiny shift. But Carl heard it. The violinist heard it. And in the sound booth at the back of the theater, the engineer reached for the mixing board, hesitated, then pulled his hand back. In box 7, the woman leaned forward again. She whispered something to the man in the gray suit. He nodded, pulled out a pen, wrote something on the program in his lap. Dean kept singing, kept smiling, kept pretending he hadn't just rewritten the song in front of 5,000 witnesses. Wait for it. This moment matters more than it seems. Carl wasn't stupid. He'd seen performers crack under pressure. Seen singers forget lyrics, miss cues, walk off stage because the weight got too heavy. He'd seen careers implode over smaller things than whatever was happening tonight. But Dean wasn't cracking. He was adapting, shifting, moving through the performance 3 moves ahead of everyone else. The question was why? And Carl hated not knowing why. He glanced at the wings, saw Tommy still there, pale under the work lights, gripping the curtain. The kid looked like he'd witnessed a crime and wasn't sure whether to report it or run. Then Rita appeared, stage manager for 12 years, clipboard in hand, headset on. Her face was tight, professional, but angry underneath. She reached Tommy, leaned in. Her lips moved, too quiet to hear but sharp enough that Tommy's face went red. He shook his head, said something. Rita cut him off with one finger up. She pointed toward Dean, said something else. Tommy's shoulders slumped, and Carl understood. Something had happened backstage. Something Dean knew about, and nobody else did. He kept playing, kept watching, kept trying to piece it together. In the sound booth, Mike the engineer adjusted levels and wondered why Dean's voice sounded different tonight. Not bad different, present different, like he meant every word. Mike had worked enough shows to know that mattered. He leaned into the mixing board and made a decision. Record tonight, full show, just in case this turned out to be one of those performances people talked about 20 years later. He hit record. The reels started turning, and history began documenting itself. The lights dimmed slightly between songs. Not a blackout, just a shift, enough to let the audience breathe, enough to let Dean take a sip of water from the glass on the stool beside him. The glass was sweating, condensation running down the sides, leaving a ring on the wooden stool. He set it down carefully, looked out at the crowd, and for just a moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 5, his expression changed. Not the smile, not the charm. Something underneath. Something tired, something that knew this night was about more than singing, about more than entertaining 5,000 people who'd paid to forget their troubles for a while. It was about drawing a line, about saying no when yes would have been easier, about remembering that some things mattered more than money or convenience or keeping powerful people happy. Then it was gone. The smile came back. The lights came up, and Dean picked up the microphone like he'd never put it down. "I want to tell you something," he said. His voice dropped half an octave, became more intimate. The kind of voice that made you lean forward, even if you were in the back row. "And I want you to listen close." The room went silent. Even the bartenders in the lobby stopped pouring drinks. You could hear the ventilation system humming. Someone's watch ticking 3 rows back. The rustle of fabric as 5,000 people shifted forward in their seats simultaneously. "I've been doing this a long time," Dean continued. His hand rested on the microphone stand. His wedding ring caught the light, long enough to know that some nights you sing for the crowd, and some nights you sing for yourself, and the best nights, he paused, let the silence sit heavy and full. The best nights, you can't tell the difference. Applause started. He raised a hand. It stopped immediately. The power of that gesture, the way 5,000 people obeyed without question, would have been frightening if it weren't so natural. "Tonight," he said slowly, clearly, each word chosen with precision, "I'm singing for you." And he meant it. You could hear it in his voice, see it in the set of his shoulders, feel it in the way the theater seemed to contract and expand around those 4 words. In box 7, the woman in diamonds shifted in her seat, uncomfortable, uncertain whether she'd just been complimented or challenged, or both. The note had listed 3 songs to cut. Dean hadn't cut any of them, but now, with 10 minutes left before intermission, he was about to add a 4th. "Carl," he said, turning to the piano. "You know Carolina in the Morning." Carl blinked. That song wasn't on the set list, wasn't even in the rehearsal notes. It was old, pre-war, something Dean's father used to sing. "I know it," Carl said slowly. "Good." Let's do it. The band exchanged glances. The violinist adjusted her bow. The drummer shifted his grip, and Carl started playing. In box 7, the woman stood up, not to leave, just to be seen standing. The man in the gray suit touched her arm, said something. She shook her head, stayed standing. Dean sang the first verse. His voice was softer now, less performance, more memory, the kind of singing that doesn't care about hitting every note perfectly, because the feeling is the note. And here's the thing, the crowd didn't move, didn't cough, didn't shift in their seats. They just listened, because something in the room had changed, something Dean had decided without announcing, something that turned a concert into a conversation. Remember this moment. It's the pivot. 5,000 people didn't know about the note, didn't know about the demand, didn't know that Dean was walking a tightrope between keeping his integrity and keeping his career, but they could feel something, a current under the surface, a weight in his voice that hadn't been there at the start. In the wings, Rita was talking to Tommy. Her voice was low, clipped, professional. Tommy's face was red. He kept shaking his head, saying, "I thought he should know. I thought." Rita cut him off, pointed toward the stage, said something that made Tommy go quiet, and Dean kept singing. The song ended. Silence. Then applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind. The kind that starts slow and builds and doesn't stop until the performer acknowledges it. Dean bowed, raised the microphone, looked directly at box 7. Sometimes, he said, you have to sing the songs people don't expect, because those are the ones that matter. The woman in the box sat down, slowly, like she'd just lost something and was trying to figure out. The man in the gray suit wrote another note on the program, folded it, put it in his pocket, and Dean turned back to the band. One more before intermission, he said. Let's make it count. Carl knew what was coming. So did the drummer. So did every musician on that stage. The next song on the set list was Volar. Big, bright, full of energy, the kind of song that sends people into intermission buzzing, ready to come back for more. But Dean didn't call for it. Instead, he said, "Carl, give me The Way You Look Tonight," a love song. Slow, intimate, the kind of song you sing when you want people to feel something instead of just hear something. Carl started playing. The band followed, and Dean sang like he was the only person in the room. In box 7, the woman stood again. This time, she left. The man in the gray suit stayed. He leaned forward, elbows on the railing, and watched. Look at his face. He's not angry. He's not bored. He's listening. The curtain came down. The house lights came up. 5,000 people stood, stretched, headed for the lobby, the restrooms, the bar. Dean walked off stage. Didn't look at Rita, didn't look at Tommy, just walked past them, through the backstage hallway, into his dressing room, and closed the door. He sat down, pulled the note out of his pocket, read it again. Then he tore it in half, dropped it in the wastebasket, and poured himself a drink. When the second half started, Dean walked back on stage like nothing had happened. The crowd roared. The band played. And for the next hour, he gave them everything: energy, charm, humor, heart. He sang Volar. He sang Ain't That a Kick in the Head. He sang every song on the set list, and 2 more for good measure. And in box 7, the man in the gray suit stayed, watched, clapped. And when the show ended, he stood with everyone else. The woman didn't come back. After the final bowl, after the lights went down, after the crowd filed out into the night, Carl found Dean in the dressing room. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Carl asked. Dean looked up, smiled. "Just felt like mixing it up." "That's not what that was." Dean shrugged. "Maybe not, but it's what it needed to be." Carl nodded. "Didn't push. Knew better. You did good out there." We did good, Dean corrected. Couldn't have done it without you. Carl left, and Dean sat alone for a while longer, tie undone, jacket over the back of the chair, staring at the torn note in the wastebasket. Tommy found an envelope slipped under his apartment door. Inside was a note, handwritten, short, unsigned. You made the right call. Don't second-guess yourself. He folded it carefully, put it in his wallet, carried it for the next 40 years. 2 weeks later, the funding came through. The tour continued. The recording contract was signed, and Dean never mentioned the note again. But the man in the gray suit, who turned out to be the senator himself, not his wife, sent a letter to Dean's manager. It said, "Tell him I stayed for the whole show. And tell him I get it now. Some things you don't compromise on." Even when someone asks, the letter was filed. Never shown to Dean, but management stopped sending notes. And the woman in box 7, she sent flowers. No card, just flowers. Dean threw them away. In the moment between the spotlight and the song, in the 3 seconds when Dean glanced toward the wings and made his choice, he thought about something his father told him once. The audience doesn't pay to see you obey. They pay to see you be. That night, he was, and 5,000 people went home, remembering a concert where the singer stopped pretending and started meaning it. They didn't know why. They didn't need to. They just knew something had been different. Something had been real. One breath, one choice, one signal. That's all it took. When people asked Dean about that night, and they did, occasionally in interviews or green rooms or quiet moments between sets, he'd smile that famous smile and say, "Every show's different. That one just happened to be more different than most." And if they pressed, if they asked what made it different, he'd shrug and say, "I sang the songs that mattered," which was true. But not the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler and harder. He'd chosen to be the kind of performer who couldn't be bought, even when the price was high, and the audience 5,000 strong, dressed in their best, hoping for a good time, had rewarded him for it without ever knowing they were part of the test. That's the magic of it. That's the part worth remembering. Not the songs, not the lights, not even the applause. The choice, the signal, the moment when a man in a tuxedo decided that integrity was worth more than compliance and sang like his life depended on it, because in a way, it did.